Okay. So, in my original project proposal, beadwork is nowhere to be found. For years when I considered what I wanted to do for my senior project, I knew I would tend towards artistic creation. In the beginning, this took the form of pottery. I wanted pieces of art that I would like to see in my day-to-day life that have a deeper value for me. It is hard for me to describe my motivation for the designs I created when I considered pottery, but I remember being more focused on the beauty and the meaning behind the pottery rather than the functionality. I had a vision, but nowhere to begin, so I started reaching out to artists that I knew had studios. Unfortunately, these proved to be dead ends as fear of COVID grew and the personal nature of the art of pottery was dashed to pieces. I was left with some sketches that I had created as inspiration for my pottery, but little else to show. With time running out, I needed to work with what I had. I thought about creating greeting cards out of my pottery art, but this idea felt underwhelming and uninspiring. This was my position as we rounded the corner into December and all the senior projects around me were already underway. So I reevaluated. Okay. As December approached, I made a tentative and defeated decision to stick with the greeting cards. I reached out to Erica to request her mentorship, and we had a meeting to hash out my direction. I wanted to have an explanation for my art, but that eluded me. We had a discussion about what art I had a history of creating and my tendency toward intricate detail. We brainstormed, and Erica mentioned the idea of beadwork. I had a memory then from my childhood, walking through my grandma's little shop on the Boys Fort Reservation in northern Minnesota, filled with all forms of beaded art. We're good. I had little connection to my grandmother. We would visit and catch up, but there was still significant distance in our relationship. As far as I can remember interacting with her, she had been deep in the throes of dementia, and it was hard to form a connection. One of my greatest memories was her little shop with her looms, rugs, and headdresses. I was intrigued by the idea of the beadwork and the memory it sparked, and it felt an intuitive moment of assurance, like it was meant to be. The idea fed my need for exploration in new forms of art and simultaneously held a personal significance in my history. Okay. I was confident in this and determined to pursue it. Erica offered me a connection to a local beater and mother, Kindred Wazigale. Within our first meeting, it became apparent to me that I was on the right path. I had little idea of what physical pieces I would be able to create, but I understood that I wanted to create something I could frame. Kindred introduced me to the idea of applique, 2D beading that I could tack down and frame. At this point, I had little time to contemplate and compare, so with Kindred's guidance, I made the decision to purchase my materials before I knew what I would be doing. In retrospect, I meant that was perhaps unwise. I spent approximately, okay. Here are some of the materials I chose, just a short little list of what worked for me as a beginner. I had unrealistic aspirations to create a large number of pieces, and this did not come through. Ultimately, I had to reduce my project quite a bit, and as I awaited my materials, I had time to actually consider what I wanted to create. I thought about what I knew and what was familiar when I came to the decision. While I was in the process of making these decisions, I needed to consider my service. I wanted it to be related to the content of my project in a direct way. I did some digging and discovered that the reality of my grandmother's shop is, okay, the story of my memories was currently sitting abandoned and water damage in the cold Minnesota winter, as it had been for several years. My grandmother moved in with my aunt long ago as her dementia worsened and left her belongings in the old little brick building. Although some of her beads and the more valuable contents of her store had been sold off long ago, there was plenty of leftover pieces, and she was still paying electricity in the dingy building, although it was no longer a business. So I requested to help, and I offered my assistance in cleaning it out and helping sell it, and that's how my service aspect was created. So, okay. This project began with really hands-on approach. I met with Kindred and we examined some of her beaded art, discussing the different forms of beadwork, and I set off with tacking down my first bead. We learned about rosette pattern where each bead and color must be lined up perfectly. The first thing I noticed during the creation of this project was how long it took me. Between work and school, I put chunks of the day aside to work, and I would come to feel quite disheartened by my lack of progress. After a long day of inconsistent beading, after a long journey of inconsistent beading, I tacked on the final bead in my tiny rosette flower. And there it was. All right, so as I considered what piece I wanted to create next, I found myself hung up on what I wanted to represent in my art. Drawing is fluid. You can represent anything because there's an ease to how quickly it is able to transform. With beading, your imagery must be incredibly structured, so there's pressure to be confident in your work. Beadwork is often about symbolic storytelling, and pieces represent more than we can easily gather upon observing. Often designs are produced through dreams as well, traditionally. As I sketched, I had a hard time coming up with a simple enough design, and I looked towards my memory for ideas. Unfortunately, not my dreams. I stumbled upon the poem of Hiawatha, and a scene came toward me of a lakeshore with a big moon and dark pine trees. It felt simple and evoked meaning, so I chose to go with it, hoping to create a symbolized representation that might suit my artistic fancies. Okay. Aside from my struggle with the search for meaning, another area of challenge I discovered was time and my personal management of the time that I had. Although the pressure and steady slowness could become frustrating, it occasionally revealed to me a new appreciation. My favorite art is when every little nook and cranny has been labored over, when beauty and detail is evident in each little piece. Beading provides this. It gives you an opportunity to focus and forces you to have intent in every stitch, and it delays your gratification. Not only this, but the time aspect helped me understand why beadwork is such a spiritual and honored art form because of that need for time and attention. It is no wonder to me that this art form is so valued. With the countless distractions and responsibilities in day-to-day life, it was easy for me to get discouraged. But it also brought to mind the people of the forest and their dreams and myths and their days spent beading with so much care. It made me admire them all the more. Thinking back on the dedication of our beading forefathers, it is hard for me to imagine the world they lived in. Beads have been traced back as far as Mesopotamia, where they were made from lime and sand paste wrapped around sticks and heated, then painted. They were often used for necklaces with religious meaning in many cultures and developed into various mediums as time went on. The beads that I focused on come from North American native beadwork, but this might not be possible without trade. Many cultures used pine quills in their art, and when beads entered the scene, they became much more varied and dynamic. Patterns and designs were developed sometimes with the assistance of European designs, but came to represent families or tribes with special meaning. Beads were precious and highly valued. I felt a bit guilty considering this because all the corners of my floor and my room and my bed are scattered with beads that I would most likely just vacuum up. The legacy of beads and trade is strong and alive, and I could have once found it in my grandmother's little shop, where she taught classes and sold pieces of beaded art to powerhouse and held vendors for bead artists. It made sense to me to help end that chapter as I was attempting to continue it. My father and I planned a brief trip up to the shop with the goal of returning valuable items, clearing the junk, and getting it ready to sell. Upon arrival, we were given the key and stepped tentatively in. We discovered an overwhelming must and mold and water damage, as well as a host of damaged jewelry and a headdress. We recovered some treasures and did the best we could with what we had to clear everything up. Additionally, we were able to speak with the city about selling, and the conversation was helpful. Now everything is cleared and the shop is in order to sell. And we headed out. It felt good to see that through. Okay, so where we are now. This is all I have, besides my rosette. I think I do plan to continue. I have quite a lot more beads left and more time. But it's a little tricky. I find that it's a little tricky for me to work with a deadline in this kind of project. But I do hope to continue, and I appreciate where it's taken me. And for my thank yous, I'd like to thank Kindred for everything and more, for being so graceful and patient with me because I'm not the best communicator. And my dad for his support and willingness to be involved in my service, Erica for her magic words, and my mother for her support and consistent reminders, and then my aunt and my dad's cousin for the shop fees, and my grandmother, she's still alive. I don't know if that was clear in my presentation. She's still around, but that's it.
Yes, Sadie. People love you. Well, that's really, you can't see that, can you? Sorry. Whoa.
Did you put her beaded piece as the backdrop?
I could. Yeah. Hold on a second. Well, let's hear some questions.
You got a question? I was just gonna say the last one was really pretty. I really like how you did the water.
Okay, Sadie, I'm curious. Did your grandmother make jewelry? Did you consider making jewelry?
Yes, she did make jewelry, and I did consider it, but not for very long. I don't know. It seems. I wanted to be able to to hang it, not wear it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Sadie, does that piece have symbolism or significance? Is there something you can tell us about it?
Not really. Yeah, but there's nothing beyond that.
Sadie,
You go. You just go. Go for it.
how big is your piece?
How big is it? They want to know.
Tell her it's huge.
No, it's not. I don't know if you can tell by the beads, but they're quite small. So it's
So the size of a chalkboard panel.
yeah.
It's like this.
Yeah. It's small.
That's right.
It's like
300%.
what?
That picture is probably 300%.
It's support this.
Yeah, Sadie, you're underselling yourself.
That's what minimize the work that you can.
Well, I don't think weeding is supposed to be.
No, it's not. It's
That's the idea.
Is that everything?
There's any other questions here? All right, everyone, Josh? Taper down, audience. What process, we missed a couple. Do you have a plan for the rest of the piece?
Well, yeah. Yes, I do. I was hoping to finish the sky, but I do have a plan.
What process did you use to choose your palette?
Just what I felt looked good. What colors felt right.
Did your time at conserve school influence that landscape piece?
I don't think so. Maybe. I didn't think about that. It's a good question. What?
Any questions?
No, I just want to say that I really like how like you can adapt to a new proposal designing your new project in the middle of December, which is like you can finish a very beautiful project within this short time. If I were you, I would just probably gonna talking hard and just say, okay, guys, this is as far as I can get.
Thank you. I feel like that was kind of, I didn't really do that. That just kind of like happened. So I was lucky.
Maybe one more time for one more.
What color is the sky gonna be?
It's like gonna be black and blue because it's nighttime because it's in the moon. Okay.